Hi everyone, this is Dr. Farouk, and in this video I'm going to give you a beginner guide to Dash. Dash is a Python library that helps you create web-based applications and interactive dashboards. So if you're a data scientist, if you are an industrial engineer who likes coding and building algorithms, then Dash is an ideal tool for you to help you create your own web applications. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to build your first Dash app. To begin with, I'm going to show you an example of an app that I built using Dash. So this app was built for architects. Architects usually deal with a lot of variables when they want to create a layout. So I thought of an interface where the user can add all those variables and then come up with an optimal layout. For example, the architect would add how many layout options should be explored, how many departments should be added, what is the width, what is the length of the layout. Then you can add different columns and rows of departments that you want to build. Then you hit on submit, and within a few seconds, an algorithm will work behind the scene and it will give you an optimal option. This example is a little bit complicated, so we will not be discussing how to build this app, but I'm going to show you instead how to build a simple app. So this simple app reads data from the internet and presents the relationship between life expectancy on the y-axis and the GDP per capita for different populations like Asia, Europe, America. And there is a sliding bar on the bottom. When you change it, it changes the data on the graph, and this sliding bar represents the years. So as the year changes, the data should also change. All right, so there are a few things that we should do before we start building the app. First, we should make sure that we have Python installed. And I personally prefer Spider as an environment to write Python script. So you can download Spider, and when you download it, then you will have already Python and all the basic libraries that you would need. Now, after you download Python, then you should go to the command prompt, and when you hit on command prompt and you open it, then there are two libraries that you should also install. The first one is the Dash library. So all you need to do is to write pip install dash and equal 1.15.0, and you click on enter, then it will install this library. You do the same thing for plotly. Okay, so now that you have the environment for writing a Python script using Spider, um, then you can open it and you can write your own script here in this window, then hit on the start button, and then you get the output in the console. Um, all right, so what is the first step? The first step is to import Dash. Import all those libraries that we will need to build that code. Components as dcc. So this one, the dcc component, is the one that has all the sliding bars, the graphs, and basically it deals with the layout of this app. The other one, an important library here, is called html components. And why html components? It's because the dash works on html. So we don't need any JavaScript, we don't need HTML. All we need is to upload the library. That's the unique thing in Dash. It makes it easier for creating an application. Dependencies and import input. And I'm not gonna explain the input and output now, but as we go to the callbacks, I will explain them because they are more relevant there. And then import. Where is it? Import plotly.express. This is the visualization library. import pandas as PD. The good thing about Spider is that as you're typing, if you have any syntax errors, you would always get tips or indications that there's something wrong. So that's another feature that is good in Spider. Okay, so the first step is to read the open source data. Now, the open source data for this example exists in, let me show you that. It exists in this website. Yep. So this is the open source data, and there are plenty of open source data in the internet. So what you can do is either read it from the open source website, or you can download it and then read it. So depending on your application, but the first row is usually the features. So you can see we have the countries, years, population, continents, life expectancy. All right, so how to read that? That's why we uploaded pandas. So we say df, this is the name of the variable, then pd, which is the pandas library, then read csv. They have a dedicated function um, for reading CSV files. All I need to do is copy this link and paste it there between brackets or between quotation marks, and then there we go. If we run this, if we hit on the play button, you can see that, and press df, then you can see that this is the data. It is already read by our code. Okay, so the next step, I'm gonna explain a few lines of codes now. This one here, it's external style sheet. It creates the styling of the layout, including the type of text, the background, the colors, and you can change it also from the website. So you can select a different layout if you want. An important thing is to define the app like this. So that's the other code here. So you say, I'm gonna provide all the codes, so you don't need to type them while I'm talking, but I just want to explain the structure of the code. Now, there is an important feature. It's app.layout equals html.division. So what does this do is creating the layout, the page layout. So again, if you remember when I opened the app, there was a layout. This is the part of the code that decides this layout. So what I'm gonna do first, I'm gonna have a graph. So I'll add the graph, and each graph should have two things. It could be more, but like the basic things: the ID, which is what is the name that you will give to the graph, and we might not use it now, but it's important to define it. Let's say I'm just gonna call it a graph with slider. And the second thing, in any graph, we will have to have something called the figure. The idea here is that we have a figure that includes the data. So the data should be defined inside the figure. So we want to use px. You remember px is here, plotly express as px. So px would access the plotly library. So px.scatter, because we want a scatter plot, right? We open brackets, and in this scatter, we will access the data. It's df, right? And then df.year to 2007. I want to only visualize now data for 2007. Let's begin with only one data, which is 2007. So I'm gonna pull the data for the 2007 year. Then on the x-axis, I'm gonna present GDP percentage per capita. That would be the x-axis. And on the y-axis, I'm gonna show the life expectancy. All right, it's pretty simple, right? Now, just to give it more features, the size of each bubble in the scatter plot, I want it to be proportional or proportionate to the population. So all I'm gonna need to do here is write the name or the ID, population, and the color would be given based on the continent. So these are the features of that Excel sheet. And when you hover on the name, I want the country to be placed. Okay, then log x true, then size max equals 55. Okay, so all of this is to define the figure. So we completed the figure, we wrote all the features in that figure. All right, so now we have a layout with only one figure. So in order to visualize the results, we will need to add a few lines. And I'm just gonna show you how to do that. So to visualize the results, we need to write on the bottom of the code this statement. If name equals to main, then application run server, and we will put the debug now as false. We don't want the debugging feature. So if we add this, then we get a website. All we need to do is copy this website, going to Google Chrome and enter it. And you can see this is what we have built so far. So we have the page and we have the figure. And as you can see, the x-axis is the GDP per capita, and the y-axis is the life expectancy, and this is the data for 2007. Nothing. That's the first step. Now we will add. What do we want to do? We will add the slider bar. The slider is accessed using DCC. So dcc.Slider. Okay, so now I added to the graph a slider bar. And same thing, there should be an ID. The minimum value of the slider bar is actually the minimum year of the df. So df is the data. This is df. And when you say df year, it means that for the feature year, for the column that is called year, choose the minimum value. Same thing for the maximum. Then when we open the software, when we open the app, we want the value to be on the minimum year, a unique data set. So the unique values in years, and we place them one by one. This is what this line does. And we don't want steps. So if we run the code now with its current state, and if I take this website, or if I refresh the page, you can see that I have two things. I have the figure, the graph showing the data for 2007, and I have the sliding bars. But as I change those, the data here is not changing. Why it is not changing? Because we haven't still finished. We have to add something called a callback. And the callback is the thing that I'm going to explain next. All right, so now the question is, how can we make this app an interactive app? We can do this through something called callback. Callback is usually placed at the end of the algorithm. I'm sorry, at the end of the code. So somewhere here. So we have the layout, we have all the inputs. So in the end, you can place the callback. Now, this is how we place the callback. So the callback function consists of two things: output, output, and input. And input. So I'm just gonna write syntax for that, and then I'm gonna explain that. So output, and then we have input. Now, if we have more than one input, more than one output, we just add brackets. But in this case, we only have one output, so we don't need really the brackets. So what goes inside the output? If we think about it, in this dashboard, the output is actually the graph, right? We want to update the graph as we change the years. And this is why the ID is important. So in the output, we call this graph using the ID that we already mentioned. Then we add a comma. Then we specify what is to be updated in the graph. So if you look at this part of the code, it consists of two things, the ID and figure. So we want the figure to be updated, right? So what we add here is the name, figure. All right, so we're done with the output. Now we go to the input. So the input is the year, right? If we change the year in the sliding bar, we want the output to change. So we change the year, and what is going to change the value of the output is the value of the input. So slider value. So you put here the word value. So figure and value, those are fixed. Figure indicates this one, and value indicates that one. Okay. So now we have the input, we have the output, we just close the callback. Now the other part, which is really important here, is called the update function. So every callback function works with an update function. So you have to define a function after each callback called update function. So we write update figure. I mean, we can change the name, but it should be a function to update, the values. And what we want to update here is the selected year. So we write selected year, right? So it means that when we have a selected year, what we want to do is filter our data based on that year that we select. So let's add something called filtered df equals df, and then df year, because we want to filter it based on the year, equals to what? To the selected year. How does this work? The selected year would be the value of the input. So the input here would go inside this, and it would select the year, and it would filter the Excel sheet. All right, so we did the first part, all right, which is the data filtering, and we want this function to return the updated figure. So you remember this one that we added here? Now it is no longer needed. So we actually take it out from here. We delete it from here. I should not delete all of it. It should be only figure part. So this guy here. Okay, so we deleted the figure, and then we added here, but we want to change this. Instead of a year, it is called now filtered data, right? So we just change this into filtered data, and everything else should be still the same. Yeah. and then we should write return figure, return the figure. So by doing this, it would return the updated figure. Um, all right. So the problem here was that in the input it should be already between brackets. So that was the error that we were getting. But everything else is correct. So we can still put this figure and figure, doesn't matter. And then we run it. Okay, so we have no problems. And then we copy this link. We go to Google Chrome and we paste this link. And that's it. You can see this interactive dashboard. You can see that the data changes as we change the years. And there we go.